Welcome to the Business of Learning, the Learning Leaders podcast from Training Industry, where we speak with industry experts and thought leaders on all things learning and development. Hi, and welcome back to the Business of Learning. I'm Sarah Gallo, a senior editor here at Training Industry.
And I'm Michelle Eggleston-Schwartz, editor-in-chief. Learning transformation is a term that's often used in L&D conversations, but it can mean very different things in practice. To unpack what it truly looks like and how organizations can enable it, we're speaking with Nick Gonios, Vice President of Learning Transformation and Company Ambassador at TalentLMS. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome, Nick. It's great to have you on. I think in the L&D space, there's a lot of terms we hear thrown around, right, pretty frequently, and learning transformation is really one of them. I'd love if, kind of setting the scene for this conversation, you could offer some insight onto what learning transformation actually means in practice. Like, what are we talking about here?
So I would say there are two schools of thought, and I'm going to go contrarian on it. But I think the first school of thought is transforming learning as a capability, as a muscle, I would say, in an organization. It's probably the traditional L&D leadership perspective and approach. And our view of the world, or specifically my view with regards to the background that I bring to the table in the role that I play in the company, is to heavily focus on what I call, so if we basically look at the term learning transformation and break it down into an acronym, we have enough acronyms in the world. Let's give it another one. Let's call it LT. In the traditional L&D space, I would say it's a capital L and a small t, which means it's a focus predominantly on pedagogy and many other ways of looking at things and methods. And there are 600 million methods of how we should teach and learn and go through the process of educating and training and so forth. And what gets displaced, what gets not focused enough is on the transformative side, on the transformation that's required. And so my view very much in this capacity that I play in thought leadership around this space, around learning transformation, I focus heavily, and I think there needs to be a reshifting in mindset around a capital T, or what I call an uppercase T learning leadership model now, which focuses heavily on the transformation that is happening in organizations that is going to happen faster than we expect, thanks to the new era of AI and the way organizations are going to be redesigned together with new digital workers, right? So this is a fundamental shift it hasn't existed in the past, I would say, and it's a very important requirement to really move into learning transformation with a uppercase T, as I call it. What that forces us to do is to start looking at how do we focus more on alignment with the business, outcomes the organization's trying to achieve, and also lastly, I would say, going out and sort of thinking about it in an ecosystem mindset of resources, capital, and capabilities, including people in the table, obviously.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. I love that if you could kind of walk us through those core elements of a learning transformation strategy and what kind of separates organizations that achieve it from those that simply deliver training.
So I think it really comes from the basis around what the software sector has done for at least a couple of decades now, which is sort of becoming a little bit more prevalent ever so slowly in the rest of the world, I would say, or the rest of industries out there, is this notion of focusing on not perfecting everything, getting stuff out the door based on a minimal viable product model, and getting continuous feedback loops from the front line, from the teams that you're operating within and so forth. And this really, when you think about it, it's the application of shifting from lean startup thinking and also the approach around design thinking that's come out of the D School out of Stanford University, funny enough, and really focusing on an individual's journey and a new behavior change that needs to happen versus a production of a program and a set of modules in a course that people have to complete. So what does success look like in that sense is when we're actually really having the L&D function shifting, moving into sort of the frontline and becoming integrated into the frontline or business units per se, and gathering as much knowledge and know-how on the fundamental problems of business that are occurring, and then trying to apply behavioral science and learning disciplines to solving for the new behavior change or the new capability that's required going forward. But in a way that isn't over-engineered, it's very much MVP driving faster feedback loops in order to be able to prioritize and drive that. And then secondly, I think the other aspect here is also an expectation wouldn't say an expectation, but a drive, culturally a drive of pull from employees and teams to want to actually learn more. And through this continuous feedback loop, being able to participate in the journey of driving this learning change. One thing that I'm big on as well at the moment is very much looking at how do we build world-class, not just world-class organizations, but world-class learning organizations, because the new frontier of best practice in organizations will be the ones that actually can learn and adapt and be resilient with learning at the center of it all. And learning which actually also is relevant, right, in many ways. So I don't know if I've actually answered your question specifically, Michelle, but it's actually how I think about things, and very much comes from being in business for over 3 decades and really transforming software companies over that period of time when I've done it 3 times over. So yeah.
Definitely love what you mentioned about keeping learning at the center of this transformation. And like you mentioned, that capital T, that transformation piece is really challenging for a lot of companies. And I'd love if you could dig into some of those challenges that often hold organizations back from learning transformation, and how can our listeners begin to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think the first point, I think there are fundamentally probably 3. I love threes. There's fundamentally 3. The first one really is a mindset issue, right? With all due respect to our L&D profession and leadership, fundamentally based around a cost center versus profit center as a shared services function, really predominantly the case, I would say not all, is really puts it in a position of a mindset of traditionally order taking, taking in requests, being able to determine how we can actually sort of serve the needs of that particular request. Sometimes it's heavily reactive as well. And so that challenge needs to be overcome by having learning and development leaders and practitioners shift in mindset to becoming what I would call performance engineers or performance consultants, right? Performance enhancers in that sense. And performance really relating to culture, people, and capabilities, and on driving the organization to where it needs to get to. So this shift in sort of mindset is the first thing. The other thing is actually, I would say, the legacy mindset of still operating in silos. We sort of have these platforms. We have our LMSs, we have our LXPs and content libraries, and they're sort of all sitting in these separate systems. And that we sort of, to be fair, one of many, a plethora of players in the marketplace from TalentLMS. And why, unfortunately, the way the organizations operate is based on the way these systems are designed and geared. Doesn't mean we're actually solving real problems from an L&D perspective, from a learning and development perspective in marketplace. So there's a thinking that needs to be recognized, is that most organizations configure their organizational design from an L&D based on the systems they actually implement, right? Versus it being the right thing, speaking about it objectively, right? So, I think then the third thing really is this whole over engineering aspect, which we need to get it all right. When we roll out a particular program with 10 or 20 modules, how do we service it for different needs in the marketplace, different bases and stakeholders, versus actually going out, testing the water, not even, let's say it's if we're just speaking about courses per se or programs, not even having rolled out all 10 or designed all 10 before we actually get feedback from our target stakeholders we're serving by just rolling out the first few, right? Doesn't have to be all at once. So it really is this sort of continuous mindset of rolling out in that perspective. I think that is something that organizations need to overcome. And I think just at high level, again, it's really going out and being, as I say, half glass full mentality, front foot, going out, talking proactively, 2 ears, 1 mouth. I mean, it's a classic. So there's a lot of that anyway, but really feel that there is an opportunity to really go out in terms of engaging directly, proactively, versus basically waiting for requests to come in. So, and it's actually reality is going to get worse and worse as organizations are going to redefine how they operate, right? So, and I haven't even spoken about AI, but I think we will, but that all changes the whole game as well. So, but they're the fundamentals in my view.
I love that you noted like the mindset shift. Like that's everything, like in how you view transformation within your company. And in shifting those mindsets is kind of difficult.
I might just say, Michelle, one thing here on that is that I remember reading a book about 20 years ago, might have been over 20 years ago, sitting on a Greek island, actually. I shouldn't have been reading a business biography, but I was, which was Lou Gerstner's. I love business biographies, just so you know. And it was Lou Gerstner's, the ex-IBM CEO from over 25 years ago, 20 years ago, I would say, when IBM was actually going bankrupt. I don't know if you're aware of this, but 18 months before they were going bankrupt, Lou Gersher came in and actually was given the role to work out what he was going to do with this organization that was multi-matrixed and everyone was everywhere, and people interconnected with everybody. And ultimately, the what he was able to unpack after 18 months of many trips around the world, understanding and communicating and conversing with many different leaders and business units and so forth, was the fact that people respect what's inspected of them as a human behavior. And so fundamentally, when we start looking at L&D or leadership, learning leadership across the board, it ultimately comes back to what ultimately are we inspected on, and disappointingly what we are bonused on at the end of the year. Sort of being quite open and transparent about things. And so that is probably at the core of organizational design and rethinking, is what are we going to respect going forward in what we do as in the function, and as it adapts and learns to becoming the new normal that is coming.
The Certified Professional in Training Management Credential, or CPTM, is designed to convey the essential competencies you need to manage a training organization. When you become a CPTM, you gain access to alumni resources like monthly peer roundtables and a full registration to the Training Industry Conference and Expo. If you start today, you could earn the CPTM credential in as little as 2 months. To learn more, visit www.trainingindustry.com/CPTM.
Definitely. That's such a great example there. I'd love if you could kind of share a little bit more about how cognitive science shapes learning transformation. Go a little deeper there.
This is a topic that I love. So at the end of the day, I try and apply first principles thinking to anything that we try and do, which is quite difficult. And if we just unpack the whole L&D ecosystem and assume it's a big, onion with so many different layers and rings, at the core of the onion, is the cognitive thinking. And ultimately, there's an amazing study that was done so many, many years ago that I love, which is all about the forgetting curve. And I'm sure that you guys are aware of it. I'm not aware of it. For me, it's at the core of everything. Everything else is just noise in the grand scheme of things if we don't respect and validate the forgetting curve, which has been validated. Hermann Ebbinghaus in 1885 did a test upon himself to actually demonstrate and find himself scientifically how much he remembered within a 24-hour period, right? And 24 hours later, he validated on himself, and it's not enough of a scientific breakthrough to be able to just do it on yourself, but he validated that he only remembered 70% of the stuff that he learned but got forgotten within 24 hours, right? This was also validated probably in 2015 when another study was done to demonstrate that is the case when you do it with many, 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 many different people as well as part of a bigger sample set. And when you look back and take a very simple perspective on things, what's happening is our metaphysical, biological adaptation of surviving as a human is heavily dependent upon how we metabolize things and our energy usage. And for what it's worth, our brain, actually what it all is worth is the fact that our brain every day is 20% of our metabolism, and energy that gets basically is being used by our brain. And so our body and mind naturally is eliminating and getting rid of excess data, right, all the time. And it happens again when we sleep as well. That's why when he says sleep properly and so forth. So really with that comes the first area, which is really recognizing that forgetting curve at the core, at the kernel of every single learning activity is required and recognized across the organization. And with that comes the area that we need to go into spaced intervals around learning over a period of time, which in the tech industry are called nudges, just so you know. So to nudge people to do something and so forth. And sometimes systems don't allow that quite easily, or you might send out an email, it might come in through Slack or whatever it was. It might be through your LMS, the LXP, whatever it might be. And then it's obviously this whole notion of active repetition, sort of bringing that up. And even with those, it actually only gets to a point of sort of doubling or just double 2.5 times improvement on learning. So with that then comes the other aspect around, the other thing that I'm sort of driven by is actually the area around simulation and pattern awareness over time. I think the combination of the forgetting curve together with simulation, and you think about where is there a best practice in simulation? Formula One, the sport that I love the most, Formula One. Formula One racing has each team invest $20 to $30 million a year in their simulation environments for these 2 or 3 drivers to actually memory test and build pattern recognition around the circuits that they're riding in. Where they crashed last time, where they slowed down, every single millisecond is all about pattern matching and recognition over time through simulation and feedback loops through people around them over time. You take that and you apply it in the real world, but also taken into industry and operations. Simulation is critical for us to be able to enable us as humans to build pattern matching over time. And so therefore, the combination of improving on the forgetting curve and bringing simulation together with coaching and mentoring is sort of the trifecta in that sense from a cognitive point of view. So I'm very passionate about this space. And the reality is there's a mismatch between the systems that are out there together, what we need to do as humans. And we're trying our best with TalentLMS and trying to improve that over time.
Exactly. No, I love that you mentioned the forgetting curve, since it's kind of mind-blowing to think, that came about all those years ago, and it's still just
Right.
such a challenge today, and still remains kind of especially so with learners navigating constant distractions and pings, like you mentioned, and
Right.
emails and all of those things, which can really lead to this information overload. Um,
100%.
so I'd love to kind of get your insight on how L&D can better design and deliver learning that engages employees kind of with all of that distraction and overload in mind.
So first and foremost, I'd say it's not all about tech. It's not all
Yeah.
about tech. Tech only
Mhm.
enables one part of learning, I would say, right? Sort of that sort of programmatic stuff and that sort of. Having said that, we can shift towards personalized things at scale over time. So we'll probably talk a bit about that maybe when if we get to talk about AI in some sense. I'm not sure, but there's an aspect around. I think relevancy is an important area. So. And how do you bring relevancy? If you think about relevancy, back to what we spoke about with forgetting curve and simulation, bringing relevancy to the center, front and center, is critical. It's the most important thing, right? And one of the interesting terms that's get used right now a lot is, in the flow of work, right? So everything needs to be in the flow of work. I just talk about it when work needs to be done. We need to also be learning on the go, right? When we need it most. And I think that in itself is where the opportunity brings a life to start to bring some form of performance uplift is sort of the relevancy of having the ability to learn on the go when's required. I think the other aspect as well is from a learning leadership point of view and practitioner perspective, really the aspect around shifting mindset to curation versus creation of content is critical. I would say that there's a plethora of learning libraries out there and content libraries, but there still isn't enough of a focus and mindset around curating the learning journey for people, depending on the different type of learning pathways they want to take, including offline hybrid mentoring, guilds, experiences, and many other aspects to what it means to learn, right? To learn doesn't mean to take half a dozen courses and you're done. And we know the fact that people forget those, as we just said before. It's very much also having been shepherded or shadowed by an individual or people or group where you can actually do things. One of the aspects that I'm very big on is we're shifting into a world now where each member in an organization are going to have we're going to have superheroes in organizations because of AI. And with that will come an ability for us to rethink what it means to be humans in work, because we're going to have digital labor forces coming through, right? What it means to be humans in work and in work environments will be very much around having a strong sense of emotive connection and reasoning, and the ability to do that over time is going to be critical. So, and then the last aspect I think really is the ability to remove friction from the equation, right? And this is probably the most important. One of the most important aspects is that, unfortunately, I'm a big believer, and we're heavily working towards is how can you get to 1 or 2 clicks to achieve an outcome is critical when it comes to learning. Unfortunately, we're very very much stuck in checkbox learning, as we call it, and really gearing people towards a journey based on the systems that we have versus unlocking them and delivering value where we should be where they are, versus forcing them to come down the path that we have because we're using a piece of technology or the like or type of process and system. So, that this is a whole discussion, but we've only got so much time.
Yes. And in that relevance piece that you talked about, it's so important for engaging learners and enhancing recall. It's really what's going to help our learners today who are so distracted. retain the information that they need. And so getting them that information in the flow of work is so important for learning
Hmm.
leaders.
Hmm.
And I'd love to dig into kind of the role of technology in learning transformation and really what the emergence of AI tools, what does an effective learning tech stack even look like today?
Okay, so we are going through a fundamental shift in what it means to, we use the term tech now, right, as we know. Having been in the industry for 30 years, over 30 years now, I've seen the evolution from client server to cloud to SaaS to now AI, right, or generative AI. And there's many flavors of that now as well coming through. And we're still at the early stage of that paradigm. So if we reflect upon what we've been doing for the last 50 years at a macro level, we really have taken what we've done with cabinets and folders and classifying in folder structures in an offline world, right? We had typewriters and pages, and I remember I had a pager back in the day when I was a young pup, so to speak, doing what I did back in the day in Sydney, Australia, all the way through to taking those existing systems and flows and processes in a digital manner and applying them in what we call software in the current type of model, which ultimately what software is a store of record powered by a database that is powered by a set of functions that we input as humans. There's some logic that happens with the software, and then it spits out some output that we can either view on reports at the end of the day, right? So if you think about it, we've been I was going to say we've been forced, we've been guided towards having to work and utilize these top software capabilities under this new software as a service model that enables us to access the same type of technology over a period of time anywhere in the world we can be, thanks to the internet, right? So we've unlocked a lot of value. Having said that, what's happened is we've been forced to really have operate in an industrialized model at the end of the day, right? And being very much a one-to-many model. Anything non-one-to-many, super expensive, as we know, right? Especially when it comes to content as well. So it's been a factor of people, resources, and capital that has challenged us in where we're at. So systems of records is where we're at. Where we're entering now, the new era, is what I call systems of intelligence. And systems of intelligence, I try not to use the word AI as much as I can because it means so many different things and it's become the crazy new buzzword because it's the new era that we're living in. But ultimately, it's a systems of records with systems of intelligence where there's a big digital brain that operates in some way similar to the way our brain works with neural networks, that we ask it questions openly in a natural way as though we're speaking now, and it responds back to us. What it's telling us, how much we trust it or not at the moment, is an issue in itself, the believability of this stuff at the moment. So there's some guardrails that need to be put in place. And so where we're going is there are these sort of, I would say, these 2 or 3 silos that exist right now. And we're seeing organizations that are, using the different artificial intelligence technologies to roll out and build questioning capabilities and learning and quizzes and courses on the go, right, along the way. They are in addition to the systems of records that we have. So where are we going? I see is the interfaces will change over time. They'll become more frictionless with AI technologies. And secondly, our systems of records will become a place where we will actually value them from a trust and governance point of view in terms of tracking and measuring and sort of maintaining presence on what people are actually doing. And ultimately, with the combination of these two together, proactively driving intent on where things need to be done and what we anticipate people would need as they transition in their organization or even in their flow of work, in their daily work to be done. So we're in very, very interesting times. And for me, I see it as a half glass full opportunity. Many L&D leaders right now and practitioners are thinking, oh my God, what does it mean right now in my profession, in the industry that we're in? And I'm saying, well, let's take a positive look at this, and ultimately it actually unlocks the opportunity to deliver greater value across the organization faster and better, ultimately over time.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Well, that's a great note to end us on, Nick. I appreciate you offering some clarity around this topic. Before we wrap up, do you have maybe one practical step or action our listeners can take after the episode, really just to start moving closer toward learning transformation?
Yeah, I think I would look at, there's probably a couple I would say. Well, first thing is really just looking at all the different initiatives that L&D activities that your organization is doing and really trying to see where is there a high effort low impact program, right? If you looked at a 2x2 chart and said, where is there high effort? It's so much friction, a lot of effort to be done, but low impact and value. We just got to stop it. Makes no sense anymore, right? Just cut it. It's not worth it. If you valued your time, you cut it. If you don't value your time, you continue. It's really simple, right? And so with that comes the reallocating those resources and people and effort and mindset to solving, going out into the organization and trying to partner with the organization of solving a high impact problem, business problem, organizational problem is the first thing. The second thing I would say is great opportunities to go and actually just shadow learners out there in the field, in the organization, get out of the ivory tower, as we say, and start to get out and have coffees and lunches with people and start talking to them in terms of how they operate, right? Versus thinking how they do, but actually finding out how they do. I think the last thing I would finish up with is actually really getting into a mindset shift around being agents of behavior change at the end of the day, right? Together in partnership with HR or people, right? So I think they're the fundamentals, I would say, is sort of I would say very mindset oriented shift, and also just starting to reconsider how you're allocating your time in terms of much more higher value outcomes ultimately. Because if you don't do that, you will become irrelevant. Let's be frank, right? Let's be frank. Let's not beat around the bush, as they say in Australia. You will be irrelevant, and it's for this reason. It's exactly a massive opportunity to step up and be set free to do what we need to do in our organizations and build them up as being world-class learning organizations, in my view.
Nice. Well, on that note, Nick, thank you so much for talking with us today. How can our listeners get in touch with you after the episode if they'd like to reach out?
Really simple, LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. So yeah, they can reach out, and it's Nick Gonios, Nick, N-I-C-K, Gonios, G-O-N-I-O-S. Really, really active on that on a daily basis, I would say. And secondly, we're going to be at Training Industry Conference, TICE, this year as well. So we'll be there mid-June, and would love to see everybody come along and say hi to the Sydney-sider Australian who now lives in Athens, Greece.
Awesome. For more resources on this topic, check out the episode description or visit the show notes on our website at trainingindustry.com/podcast. And don't forget to rate and review us wherever you tune in to the business of learning. Until next time.